Awesome. Alrighty. So welcome everyone. Where we're going to be kicking off today is on page 54. And we're in the chapter We Agnostics. And so as we're diving in, what we're talking about really is the second step. And what we spoke about last week was what I like to call the second step proposition, step 2, part 2. Then step 2, how it's broken down is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves. So I've got to believe, could there be a power? And then step 2, part 2, could restore me to sanity. All I need to believe is, could that power relieve for me that mental obsession? Could that power do for me that which I see working in your lives? Those of you who are happy and sober, who have recovered, the light is on in your eyes. Could that happen to me? And so it asks us then this question. God is everything, or else God is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What is our choice to be? It's like, girl, you barely got me here with that. Like, there could be a power. Don't you be throwing this theology at me. Like, that's too much. I can't hold that. I can't catch that. Like, what? And so what we did, I see I'll make you co-host. I got you. Make co-host. Boom. And so how we reconciled that was we reconciled that by looking at our own experience in our own lives. Moments whereby seconds and inches, or centimeters, because some of us are Canadian, that we should not be alive and sober today. And are we here today? Are we here alive and sober based solely on seconds and inches? And if that is my experience, is it possible that there could be a power that is driving that? And then we had a look at those moments. Have we ever had those moments of oneness? A moment where there is a peace that is not our own that comes over us. A moment where we're, the veil is thin and we're connected with the universe. I speak about how Liz and I, we're out right by the mountains and we'll go skiing down the mountains in weather's like this, even though, she's chilly. But then when you're out in the mountains and you're in awe of nature, and you're just connected, or holding a newborn in your arms. And there's that miracle. And if we have had even one moment like that, we must say that God is, because we cannot say God is nothing. And if God is everything. And that's how we reconcile that. But what we're speaking about is that, man, that is a leap of faith. And it's like, man, we can't take that leap of faith. So last week where we're ending on was this idea, but like, hey, we have faith in all these areas of our life. Do we not have faith in our ability to reason, to use logic? And I was sharing my experience, that idea that, man, every time I came to the bottle, I came with faith. Absolute faith that bottle would take from me all the pain and suffering. Man, there was not a problem that I brought to the bottle. With absolute faith, it could solve it. And so this then leads us to page 54. So if you didn't find the page, I did give us a lot of time to find it. Page 54, first full paragraph. So now not only, I was joking. I'm not calling you guys out if you guys were just listening to the review. I'm so sorry, because I see now everyone's looking for the page. My bad. Page 54. We found 2. So not only were we driven by faith, we found 2 that we had been worshipers. So we're trying to use the spiritual judo or the spiritual jujitsu, where it's like, I can't have faith. And it's like, girl, you've had nothing but faith. And now it's saying deeper than that, you have been worshipers. It's like, I can't worship a power. Oh, but you already have been worshiping power. And it says, what a state of mental goose flesh that used to bring on. Like the mental goosebumps, like this sort of cognitive, when you're trying to hold 2 thoughts and the 2 opposing views and they somehow need to be true, that sort of mental goose flesh. As the kids are saying, that's not true. The kids are talking about Riz and Skibbity. They're not talking about mental goose flesh, but neither here nor there. It says, what a state of mental goose flesh that used to bring on. Had we not variously worshipped people To worship people is codependency. Now, I know none of you, lovely, wonderful alcoholics, have ever been codependent or could relate to that in any sort of way. But I'll tell you my experience with codependency and what it looks like. I worship you by putting you on a pedestal. And I can do that with people that seem like they have their stuff all together. I've done that with sponsors. I've also sought my whole sense of value and worth in other people, where I make them God and responsible for who I am, my self-esteem, my security, my comfort, my identity. I know nobody's ever been in a relationship like that. Just me. And then here's the thing. I also, some of you guys know, I also worship by being the one that needs to fix, save, manage, cure them. I seek that worship of I need to be needed to be okay. I'm just going to show you guys that those are some of the ways in which I have worshiped people. And I know that nobody here relates. It's such a foreign concept. And then it says, variously worship people, sentiment. And sentiment can be a whole number of things. It could be the good old days, how things used to be. But it can also be ideas that don't carry any weight, or values and ideals that maybe I have, but I could not live up to them. And I want you to know that when I came here with a set of values. I came here with a set of morals. And I could not even begin to approach them. Actually, sometimes when I joke about the relationship that I used to be in, like the big dumpster fire one, because I'm a lady, so my big dumpster fire relationship. And there were some red flags, and I was seeing those in the rearview mirror. And there were times where I would share with sponsees when it's helpful, like stories of where I would cross lines in the sand, I said I would never cross. Or even I would allow behavior in my life that was absolutely contrary to my sense of morals and values and who I was and the things that have always been so important to me. And I can do that drunk or sober. And so I worship these things, but there's no weight to it. And then it says worship people, sentiment, things. Now the things, I promise you, I'm not worshiping the new phone. This one has been on its last legs for a long time. But do we worship the new phone, the new job, the new car, the new house, the new this, the new that? Do we worship these material objects, but also do we worship them not because of what they are, but because of what they can do for us? Do I have a need to keep up with the Joneses? Or maybe not now, but did I have a need to keep up with the Joneses? Did I need the new Apple I whatever the heck so that I could have a sense of who I am? Or Google whatever the heck, we've got no opinion. But, did I try to get my sense of value and worth? Now, I know nobody here at the wee hours of the night when the loneliness and emptiness is on us try to fill the void with add to cart. But I'm just going to throw that out there. And it says, money. So have I variously worshipped money? Have I made money my God? And does that look like I'm not okay if I don't have this much in the bank? A 401k. We have a different financial system in Canada. So I don't know if I'm getting the 401k right. RRSP, RDSP, TFSA. Those are the Canadian ones. I think that's for Liz and only Liz. Gotcha, girl. But the money in the bank and also the disposable income that I have I worshipped that? And if I worship the status that it brings, or if I worshiped my sense of illusion with the security of those things. And then, it's calling me out. Have I worshipped myself? And I always think, you guys don't have to think it like this, but I always imagine Bart Simpson. If you remember in that episodes of The Simpsons when it was the flashback where right before Lisa's being born and he's insecure and jealous and he's got his pots and pans and he's like, everybody loves me. I am so great. That. Have I worshipped myself? Now, just like Bart Simpson, wasn't planning to make that reference today, and it was my worship of self driven by a deep sense of insecurity. Because I, not once in my life, have related to the, I am so great, everybody loves me, let me bang on my little drum for that. But I am fueled by an obsession of self. And fueled by an obsession of what I think others think of self. So have I had that firsthand experience with worship? And so it says, and then with a better motive, had we not worshipfully beheld? And this is those moments that I was talking about in the review, and those moments that I was talking about last week. Welcome, we're on page 54. And then with a better motive, had we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or a flower? You know those moments when you're in nature and it just takes your breath away. And there's a moment of connectedness. And I'm a spiritual seeker. My 11th step, I love seeking from a variety of faith traditions. But there are so many teachers, and I think of Saint Teresa of Avila. She was in the 1400s, mystic in Spain, and she spoke about, watching like ants crawl along the pavement, and how much the majesty of God is in that moment. And she's like, man, she didn't say man. No, she did. You know what? Yeah. Saint Teresa of Avila was like, homie, my guy, my dude. Absolutely she did. If you can see the presence of God in an ant, imagine how much more the mystery and the majesty of God is within you. And what we're going to see in the next page is how we look within. But man, there is something about nature. There's something about just that strips away all illusion, all delusion. And if we not had those moments. And it said, who of us had not loved something or somebody? And I think we can all relate to having feelings of love for somebody, especially if you're married, and maybe not right now. If the spouse left the toilet seat or the toilet paper roll in the wrong position, the socks are not in the laundry hamper, and I don't have love. But presumably to get to that position, we might have had love. And it says, how much did these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? Now, I am not a parent, but for any parents out there, if you have survived the terrible twos or the terrible teenage years, I mean, again, not a parent, but I have a feeling it's in those moments you're like, yeah, I get why hamsters eat their young, And you know that moment where, and it doesn't matter whether 2, 22, 32, 42, it does not matter. Have you had that experience where your child has been on, now I'm not a parent, I'm operating from anti-energy, but where your child has been on your last nerve all day? Just go to bed. Some of you guys are like, yes, go to bed. Doesn't matter if they're 42. Go to bed, And we finally get them to bed. Maybe after a couple bedtime stories at 36, I need water and then I need to go to the potty, all of that. And we put them to bed and we sit in the silence of the house. And then there's a pull at our heart and we miss them. And we go to their bedroom and we just open the door just a little bit. Not too much. We're not waking them up. We're not crazy. But we just open the door a little bit just to watch them sleep. And it always reminds me, if this is how we can feel about human beings in our lives, imagine how God must feel about you. Even on your worst days, even when we're feeling the most unlovable, that is the love of God that is on offer. And it says, how much did these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? It's not logical. It's not based in reason. And it says little or nothing we saw at last. And it says we're not these things the tissue out of which our lives were constructed. Our lives are based and made on these moments of love, these moments of oneness, these moments of connectedness, which is not logical, which is not reasonable. And again, I have not parented a teenager. You know that it is not logical and reasonable to parent a teenager. I have been a teenager who is, had to be parented, so I know it from that angle. But it has nothing to do with reason, and yet it is the fabric of our lives. And it said, did not these things, after all, determine the course of our existence? The course of our existence is not based on this logical pro-cons list. It's based on these feelings, these loves. Now, again, I'm sure that you have all been far more responsible than me. But have you ever missed out on an opportunity, a good, promising business opportunity? One of those things that maybe your parents were like, go to that school or do that thing. But we were in love and we weren't going to follow that suggestion. You know what I mean? Was not the course of my life driven by the love that I feel for others? And that's not logical. That's not reasonable. And when we look back at our lives, what are the moments that we remember? For most of us, it's not, I saved $42 with a whole bunch of coupons. It is those moments of oneness and connectedness, that novelty that we experience when we dive into the unknown for those that we love. That is what our life is based on. So how could we say the idea that there could be a God is illogical? And how could we say we have no capacity for faith or worship? And it says it was impossible to say we had no capacity for faith or love or worship. In one form or another, we had been living by faith and little else. Has that not been my experience? My life is based on faith, not logic, not reason. And so, page 54, for those that just joined, glad you're here. It says, imagine life without faith. Were nothing left but pure reason, it wouldn't be life. And if it was just pure, cold, logical reason, actually, this is just, sometimes my brain takes me places. If you're ever one of those kids, and I know, and then you guys got to come along for the ride. I'm so sorry. If you were ever one of those kids, or maybe you still have it, and there's not an ounce of judgment. I think it's a beautiful thing. If you're holding on to your old childhood blanket, your old childhood stuffed animal, one of those things, or you just have a memento, maybe a parent or a loved one that gave with you, that you trudge along life with, that silly little knick-knack that you bring and whenever you move, that somebody gave you that makes you think of them or makes you think of a time in your life. Man, that's not logical. That's not reasonable. You got to dust that. I'll be honest, I don't do any dusting. You got to clean that. You got to pack that. That's not based in logic, but that is our lives. Imagine life without that. We're nothing left but pure reason. It wouldn't be life. But we believed in life. Of course we did. We could not prove life in the sense that you can prove a straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points, yet there it was. And you see, existence is not something we can prove based on a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That's the Pythagorean theorem. And let me tell you, I was quite obtuse on that angle. I was going to try to make oh no, I can't land my geometry hypotenuse joke is what I was going to try to make. But what's interesting is that life is something that we feel and we experience, just like God, higher power, creator, spirit of the universe. It is experiential. And we can't, like, there's that moment, like, when do you prove that life exists? I mean, we can't in the way that people want to. And what is interesting about this idea that, like, you can prove a straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points. Well, a funny thing about that, a funny thing about logic and reason, he says, if I hold on to that idea that the shortest distance between 2 points is always a straight line, well, recently it was proven that if you were to drop a marble on 3 different tracks, one a straight line track, one with a slight curve, and one with a very deep curve, it will travel fastest on the slight curve. Oh, wouldn't you know it? That same logic, that same reason that brought me here, oh, that's not true anymore. There is a deeper truth. And you know what? If you are able to believe me, it's true. You can look up, you can see it on a video. But if you in that moment are able to believe me, that, okay, I believe that's true, then we've already been able to overcome that. Could there be a God? There is no God. Maybe I could change my mind. That's all that this is asking of us. So it said, could we still say that the whole thing, as in the universe and our existence, was nothing but a mass of electrons created out of nothing, meaning nothing, whirling onto a destiny of nothingness? Of course we couldn't. The electrons themselves seem more intelligent than that, at least so the chemist said. And a couple weeks ago, I was sharing that experience of my aunt, who was an electrochemist and understood the world in a way that I will never be. I've never seen an electron. I've seen pictures of them, but I've never eyeballed an electron. And I bet she would have put eyes on electrons. And when she was dying of cancer, she planned out her whole service, her whole funeral. And in it, the funeral card, it had, "Be still my soul, and the Lord is my shepherd." And I always think, man, that she was type A, she was driven by science. And if she could have faith, she's, at least so the chemist said, my aunt, that doesn't have to touch you the way it affects me, but we have people in our lives that are so smart and understand the world in such a level, and they believe. So who am I? And I talk about this and spoke about this. I don't believe, we hear that saying nobody is too stupid to get AA, but there's some who's too smart, and I don't think there's anyone too stupid or too smart to get AA. I think there's a lot of people who think they're too smart. So it says, hence, we saw that reason isn't everything. Neither is reason, as most of us use it, entirely dependable. Now, I didn't mean for the book to call us out like this, but rude. Reason, as I use it, has not been entirely dependable. And it says, even though it to emanate is to come from our best minds. Now, I'm going to call us out, so rude of me. My best reason, my best logic, my best intellect got me drunk. I could not think through my most, I would try, up against the mental obsession, I would try to throw logic and reason and intellect, and I would drink again. And I'll even go a little bit deeper. I don't know about you. Last week we were talking about the bedevilments. And the bedevilments are what it is like for somebody like me to live with a conscious sense of separateness from God. That is prey to misery and depression, couldn't make a living, feeling of uselessness, filled with anxiety, uselessness, fear. And I'm pulling in from a vision for you, the 4 horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. Man, that was my life. And I could use all my logic and all my reason and all my, intellect. And I would throw it right at it. And it would bounce right off. I had no solution for my drinking based on my logic, my reason, and intellect. And I had no solution for the abject misery of my life based on my logic, reason, and intellect. And now it's going back to the societal, back to society, back to science. What about people who proved man could never fly? Because that was the thought. There is no way man could ever fly. Then 2 bicycle repairmen in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, flew for maybe 7 seconds. I'll round it off. We'll say 8 or 9 seconds. They flew, and we changed our mind. And I was reading about some of the history of air travel. It's a long roundabout story. I was listening to old timey books because I'm fun at parties. But there was a tremendous growth from that point on. Like it took flight. Pardon the pun, or don't pardon the pun. That one was intentional. And they were able to open their mind. And just as, and the metaphor of airline travel we see throughout this chapter. And just as society, we were convinced man could never fly, and then we saw evidence of flight, we radically changed our minds to the point where it's like maybe one day we'll even see man on a moon, or the moon, a moon. The moon. Now, the same thing is true for us. And it says, yet we had been seeing another kind of flight, a spiritual liberation from this world. People who rose above their problems. And that is what we are witnessing. I'm sitting in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, not able to stay sober, miserable, wanting to die. And I see you, happy and sober. At the same time, you're not wrapped up in that bondage of self, that warm blanket of self-pity that turns into a noose. You're living your best life. You're not taking yourself so seriously. You have something I don't have. You are a demonstration of flight. Now, in this moment, I don't have the airplane. I don't even have a plane ticket. But all I need to do is not show up to the Calgary airport and gaslight the airline employees. I know you, go to WestJet or Air Canada. I know you think that the airplane is going to work for you, but I just don't believe in it. It doesn't, all I need to believe is that you're flying and that you have what I don't have. That's it. Now, I've got to take flight. And so what I've got to do is I've got to take this course of action. And this course of action is what allows me to build the airplane, to put it together, to manufacture it, and to maintain it as it flies. Now, if we were building a literal airplane, you guys are gonna be following those instructions. We're not gonna do that thing. I made this joke last week. We're not gonna be doing that thing we do with IKEA furniture, where it's like, extra nuts, whatever, nuts to that. We are not gonna be eyeballing it. We are wanting to follow the directions precisely. And unlike most other areas of my life, we've got to maintain it. We've got to maintain it. We got to, if we're flying an airplane, we might not have changed our oil for the car in a while, but we're going to make sure that the oil, the gas, you know what I mean? We're not flying on fumes. It's an airplane. It's like that with our spiritual life. So we just got to start with other people are flying, and I don't have it yet. And what I want to point out is it says the spiritual liberation, freedom. That's what we're after. Freedom, not just don't drink today, freedom. And it talks about spiritual liberation from this world, people who rose above their problems. Problems, not problem. Of course, my problem is alcoholism, but all my problems. You see, there is not a problem in my life that I cannot bring to this power, not a problem in my life that I cannot bring to God through these 12 steps. And that's what I'm after. Not just don't drink today. Well, it's a good day if I'm not drinking. And I'm not saying that's not true. But more than that, freedom from problems. And it says, they said, God made these things possible. God, higher power, creator, spirit of the universe. And we only smiled. Just quietly judging, not you guys. You guys would never do that. You're the best. Love you. but I would do it, And it said we had seen spiritual release, but like to tell ourselves it wasn't true. We had seen it, and we see it in the rooms. I believe in miracles because I see miracles. I believe in miracles because of the miraculous demonstrations of those who came before, which is a reminder to me, for those that come before me, or for those who are straggling on this path, I am called to be a miraculous demonstration. Not just talking about it, not just thinking about it, but demonstrating it. So you can see that this type of flight, that spiritual liberation is possible. And man, if I don't take my problems to these steps and bring them to the God that I understand through experience, I'm not going to be as able to help you. And my life depends on helping you. So it says, actually, we were fooling ourselves. So our final arguments against this power which is God, actually, we were fooling ourselves. For deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. Deep down is this fundamental idea that there is a power beyond myself. And if you are not sure what I'm talking about, do you guys remember in school when your teacher would pull out a pop quiz, what immediately started happening? Prayer. Immediately, I would say a prayer. And actually, this is a personal story that, you will get a lens into how unwell I was from the get-go. But I remember it was probably in grade 1, maybe kindergarten, maybe 3rd grade. I don't got a good sense of time. But I remember the fire department came in and they showed us this video of how fast fire spreads. And it was like a Christmas tree, and then it spread across the room. And I will tell you, I didn't need that information. I was an anxious little being, I did not need to see that video. I was absolutely not going to play with fire. But what happened to me is, and this is every single night before I went to bed for years, I would say, please don't let the house burn down. Please don't let the house burn down. Every single night. Again, the takeaway is we've had a belief in a power from as long as we can remember. And 2, oh girl, you needed God, in kindergarten, I probably could have used a shot of whiskey or maybe vodka or something to take the edge off. I can't tell you how anxiety inducing, I'm not even kidding, tying my shoes was. Trying to learn to tie my shoes, it was too much. I needed a drink to be able to get the bunny to go around the tree, and it was too much. So that's just a window into what I was like, perpetually a delight. But it said, it may be obscured. So this view of God, or this idea of God that lives within each of us, it may be obscured by calamity. And calamity is the bad things that happen to us. A modern contemporary word for calamity would be trauma. The traumatic things that happen to us. So our view of God might be obscured by trauma, by tragedy, by heartbreak. And then it says by pomp. And pomp is ego. So this view of God, it's clouded by ego. Now, I'm going to point out there is more than one type of ego. There is the Bart Simpson, I am so great, everybody loves me ego. I'm the best in the world. I got it. And I never related to that, but I relate to what's driving Bart, which is a terrible sense of insecurity, and who I am is not enough. And that is still ego. That is still me focusing on me. If I'm the biggest piece of garbage that's ever lived, I'm still bigger than everyone else, and I'm focused on me. And then it says, by worship of other things. Well, what other things would I be worshiping? Well, we spoke on page 54. People, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves. And again, I worshiped at the altar that was alcohol. And it says, so those are the perceived barriers. That's what's blocking us. And keep in mind, the purpose of the 12 steps is to clear away the stuff inside of me, that channel, yes, that is blocking me from God. That's what I'm trying to do. And it says, for faith in a capital P power greater than ourselves. That's what we got to start with. and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. And we can't prove life in the same way that we can prove the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And so it's that idea that faith in something greater than us, that has been throughout history, throughout the earliest civilization, the dawn of humanity, there has been a belief in the awe and wonder of the universe, some sort of power that is beyond our intellectual understanding in all cultures and all creeds, all eras of humanity. And just as important as that belief has been the miraculous demonstrations of that power. And again, we are called to be miraculous demonstrations of that power. And so it says, are facts as old as man himself. It's a fact. And that's what we're dealing with. This spiritual life, we're often thinking, oh, it's airy-fairy, it's woo-woo. I'm here for the practical. And I will tell you, waking up every morning and not wanting to kill myself, happy to be alive, feeling a sense of usefulness and purpose, that is immensely practical. And the practicality that I was holding on to kept me miserable. And under the lash of alcoholism and under the lash of my suicidal ideation. So it says we finally saw that faith in some kind of God. We don't even have to fully understand it or define it or comprehend it. And you guys know that I talk about my 1930s dictionary, and the word understand in my dictionary says to know through experience. To know through experience. And I don't have to understand it here. And I couldn't possibly understand it here. I'm trying to know this power through experience right here in my heart. And so it says, we finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there. He was as much a fact as we were. And those of us who have had this experience, we're not talking about theories. We're not talking about opinions. We're not talking about ideas. We're not even really talking about feelings. We're talking about fact. This is a fact of how we have been changed. And it goes on to say that he was there. He was as much a fact as we were. We found the capital G, capital R, great reality deep down within us. So I've got to look within. And I do that through the process of these 12 steps. And the capital G, capital R, great reality. We're going to see that later on in this book. But we're not going to be thinking of the great reality. We're going to be experiencing it. And it says in the last analysis, that last mile, it is only there that he may be found. It was so with us. Our experience is that we find this power within and looking within. And not trying to go here, but through clearing away the stuff inside of me, writing that inventory, doing that 5th step, quiet hour, 6 and 7, prayer and meditation, making amends, helping others. It says, we can only clear the ground a bit, not a little bit. We can only clear the ground a bit. If our testimony, which is our experience, that's what a testimony is. It's my experience, helps sweep away prejudices. Now, prejudice is to have an old idea about an experience I've not yet had. Sweep it away. Enables you to think honestly. Encourages you to search diligently within yourself. Within yourself. So again, we're looking within. And that's the point of the 12 steps, to clear away that stuff. If you wish, you can join us on the capital B, capital H Broad Highway. So now we're just starting on the highway. And I'll point something out that's especially rude for Liz and I here in Calgary with the weather so bad. It is not the broad vacation destination. It is not like the broad Cancun lounging in the sun. It is the capital B, capital H Broad Highway. This is a path. This is a journey. This is a way of life. It is not, I have arrived. But you'll see right here, we're just going to start on that broad highway with the belief that there could be a power. And that power could remove the mental obsession. When we get to step 5 and the 5th step promises, we're going to be walking on that capital B, capital H Broad Highway, hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. That's where we get to go. And it says, with this attitude, you cannot fail. That is a promise. Y'all know there were some step 2 promises. The next one is the very next sentence. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. It will happen. You can't fail. You can't mess this up. Did you all know that Alcoholics Anonymous? It's alcoholic proof. It's gotta be, because we're a bunch of drunks, you know? You are not so powerful that you can mess this up. If we follow the directions as closely as we can out of this book, knowing that we're human, knowing that there's going to be slightly different interpretations, there's some wiggle room. If we do the best that we can at following these directions, we will get this result. That is a promise. We don't have it here in step 2, but it is promised to us. You cannot fail. And then consciousness of your belief is sure to come. Consciousness, the chapter that we're on is we agnostics. Eg is without, it's Greek in origin. Eg is without, and gnosis means knowledge. But it does not mean that intellectual, head level, yeah, I know, sponsor, get off my back. I know you guys would never talk to your sponsor in that way. I know, gag me with a spoon, sponsor. What we're talking about is that heart level experiential knowing. And when we all approach the second step, we don't have that yet. All of us, we don't have that yet. But the consciousness of our belief, as we grow our conscious contact in step 7, conscious is Latin, so completely different language origin. And con means with, and shus, as in sire, means knowing. Going from without knowing to with knowing. The with knowing, the experience of your belief is sure to come. It will happen. You cannot fail. It says in this book, you will read the experience of a man who thought he was an atheist. Now, this is my guy. He's my homie. I love him the most. And actually, before the meeting, we were talking about the weather, and I was mentioning that there was a time in my life, and I don't talk about it too much because I think I've gone to some places that I know that people be like, well, I've not been homeless in Canada, so I'm not an alcoholic. Because I was homeless in Canada and I didn't think I was an alcoholic. They'd be like, I don't live under a bridge with a brown paper bag. And I'm like, oh, I didn't have a brown paper bag. I'm not an alcoholic. So I don't often talk too much about that stuff. But I remember I was reading, and Fitzmayo, he is the second alcoholic at the very end of the doctor's opinion who had hid in a deserted bar and determined to die. And I share that experience usually at that point in the story because he was the first guy that jumped out at me where I could see, man, I did that. And I did that walking from downtown Calgary up to right by the airport, and I was sleeping by a dumpster, and I was looking for some attention. I used to play rugby, so I was not far from the rugby field, hoping they'd see me and take pity on me. But by the time I got there, I had a bit of like my body and I was just done. And I slept for 2 days. I believe like 2 days straight, 2 nights straight, no food, no water, just I was done, like sleep. And it was the third night that the temperature went down to about 30 degrees Celsius. I don't know Fahrenheit. Somebody could look it up. And I was talking about this before the meeting. This is why it's on my brain. And it was so cold that I had to hold my feet in my hands. Like that's how it was, like minus 30 degrees Celsius. It was brutally cold. And like I think about Fitz, and like he's my guy because I know he wasn't out in the cold. It was probably a lovely October day. He was gonna have a great time in his barn, and I just had some blankets. I think about that in those seconds and inches. You know, and I was joking before the meet, and I got all my fingers, all my toes. I don't deserve to be alive based on some of the things that I've done and the life that I've lived and the danger I put myself in and some of the circumstances. I won't go into too much detail, but like I'll casually reference some things like, oh yeah, that. And then it's like I'm reminded how seconds and inches my life has been. And that is all a grace of a power that is not me. Because my actions get me outside of a dumpster in 30 below. My best efforts, and I'll tell you, that time in my life, my best efforts truly were not to be here anymore. So I always got a soft spot for Fitzmayo because he just touched my heart. And oh man, we're going to talk about it. I'm like, I don't know how I'm doing for time. We'll find out. So Fitzmayo. So his story is so interesting that some of it should be told now. His change of heart. Now, what we're going to be talking about is Fitzmayo had a spiritual awakening on step 2. He had to continue to do the work, otherwise he wouldn't keep it. Most of us aren't going to have a spiritual awakening on step 2, but that's what we're talking about when we talk about his change of heart. So his change of heart was dramatic, convincing, and moving. And it said, and so Fitzmayo, his story is our Southern friend. And as we are on page 56, we're going to talk about like this moment that he had. And the moment that he had, if you have a 4th edition of the book, it will be found on page 215. So that's where that is. It said, our friend is a minister's son. Uh-oh. So now what we're going to see is his barriers to belief in a power greater than himself. He attended church school where he became rebellious at what he thought an overdose of religious education. So he had religion pushed down his throat, shoved down his throat, and so he's over it. And then all the standards of having to be a minister's kid and all that, no, he's not in for it. For years thereafter, he was dogged by trouble and frustration, business failure, insanity, fatal illness, suicide, these calamities. And that's what calamity is, these big things, these life-changing things. These calamities in his immediate family embittered and depressed him. So some of the barriers are he had it shoved on him as a kid. Some of the barriers is the trauma and the pain and the suffering that his close family went through. Man, if there is a God, why them? And then it says post-war disillusionment. It's talking about after the First World War and the horrors of the First World War. And it's like, what was the point of all of that? Coming back to normal society and this feeling of listlessness and lost and like, what's the point? And then it says, ever more serious alcoholism, impending mental and physical collapse brought him to the point of self-destruction. He's coming to the end of himself. And those are his barriers to belief in God. And keep in mind, those are real barriers. Those are real things. That is some heavy stuff. We're not glossing over Fitz's experience. I'm there with you. I see that. That is painful. That is not fair. And it says one night, when confined in a hospital, he was approached by an alcoholic who had known, not thought of, not read about, known, and that's what I'm after, knowing a spiritual experience. Our friend's gorge. And when I get to this, I'm always like, I need to use that word more often. Why, good sir, you have aroused my gorge. That's just making casual conversation in 2025. It says our friend's gorge rose as he bitterly cried out, if there's a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me. And there's many times we feel like that. There's many times we've felt like that. And it says, but later, alone in his room, he asked himself this question, is it possible? And when I'm working with others, the phrasing of, is it possible? Man, that is so useful. I learned that from Steel on Steel. Is it possible? Would you consider? Because my mind will slam shut when you're calling me out, especially on the things that I know are true. But if you throw me a page, is it possible? Ooh, that seems to sneak its way in. Is it possible? Is it possible that all the religious people I have known are wrong? Well, pondering the answer, he felt as though he lived in hell. And not to go into theology in any sense, but what I will tell you is that when my illness is untreated, hell is not a theological afterlife. Hell is in the here and now. Hell is in every moment of my life, in every breath. And just that much, if I lean into this and this way of life, heaven can be here and now. And again, not discounting anyone's theological experiences or beliefs, but I'm just saying I will make hell out of this moment. And I can, if I rely on God, make heaven out of this moment. So it says, while pondering the answer, he felt as though he lived in hell. Then, like a thunderbolt, a great thought came. It crowded all else. Who are you to say there is no God? Who are you to say there is no God? This man recounts that he tumbled out of bed to his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed by a conviction of the capital P presence. And I love that. God as a present tense verb. Presence of God. It poured over and through him with the certainty and majesty of a great tide at flood. And if you've ever seen, the devastation of floods, we can know that this is what happened. The barriers that he had built through the years. Now, those barriers were on the top of 56, and those were real barriers. Those were structures built out of pain and suffering, and in that instant, they are swept away. The power of that flood. And it says he stood in the presence, capital P presence, of capital I, capital P, capital L. The presence of infinite power and love. He had stepped from bridge to shore. He had taken that leap of faith. For the first time, he lived in conscious that with knowing companionship. And again, that's why I love that relational view, that we're building a relationship. Just as much as the feeling he had for a friend. He was there. And how do we feel about our friends? Some of them, we love them and we don't know why, right? He was there. He had stepped from bridge to shore for the first time. He had lived in conscious companionship with his Creator. Thus was our friend's cornerstone fixed in place. And that cornerstone is, could there be a power greater than myself? Step 2, part 1. Could there be a power? Well, that power came and came to him in that moment, swept it away. He can believe that there is a power. He's got his step 2, part 1. It says no later vicissitude. And a vicissitude is a problem or struggle has shaken it. And this is his step 2, part 2. Now keep in mind, it happened in step 2 for him. But step 2, part 2 is believing that this power could remove the obsession. It says that very night, years ago, it disappeared. Save for a few brief moments of temptation, the thought of drink has never returned. At such times, a great revulsion has risen up in him. Seemingly, he could not drink even if he would. God had restored his sanity. So for him, he has that experience at step 2. And so many of us do not have it at step 2. But what the experience gave him, that could there be a power? It came to him. And could that power relieve him of his obsession to drink? Well, it already happened, so it believed it could. Now keep in mind, if Fitzmayo does not continue to do this work, he's not going to stay sober. And he was working with others, and he continued. Now, I'm going to go a little bit over. Sorry, Vivian. Just a little bit. Okay, cool. Sounds good. Just a little bit. I'm trying to get us there. But I also feel it's important to share this story. Again, based on my experience. Because if I share the sleeping outside story, I should share the power of God in my life story. And so, might as well. Sometimes in the rooms, we hear people say, "Oh, man, I don't know anyone who's had an experience like that." And I'll let you know, part of why Fitz is in my heart is I have absolutely had an experience like that. And I wasn't at my second step, but I'll tell you, it was right before COVID. So we're heading into like the spring of 2019 or 2020. I don't know. We're seeing how I'm not good with, I'm like, when did things happen? That was kind of a big thing and a thing to remember. And I'm like, when was that again? Anywho, so 2020, I think. So we're at spring of 2020, and I love seeking spiritually. And I was doing a spiritual, there's a spiritual holiday where you look to give something up. and you look to add something to your prayer life, and you look to add a new way to be of service. And I knew what I wanted to do to be of service, and I knew what I wanted to add to my prayer life, but I didn't know what I wanted to give up. Now, I made the silly mistake of asking some sponsees who said, "Why don't you give up vaping?" And I was like, "Oh, gross. I would never rank sponsees, but you guys are at the bottom." Absolutely not. Now, I want you to guys know this is not an anti-nicotine story. I really do, like, this is just the power of God. And I promise you, if God had not separated me, you guys wouldn't know what I looked like, because it would just be a cloud of smoke. My sponsor at the time said, "Paige, I didn't know anyone who ever vaped as much as you." And I thought to myself, I didn't say it, somebody needs to go to more meetings. So what I did was, I still didn't know, because that was an absurd suggestion. So I went to two-way prayer, and two-way prayer was a meditation technique done by the Oxford group. And I asked, what should I give up for Lent? And I can't remember if it happened in the writing portion or if it happened in the moment of contemplation where you're sitting in God's presence after. But like a great thunderbolt that crowded out all else, I had a thought. And that thought was, how big is your God? And what came along with that thought was the knowing of, you either trust me or you don't. And you're asking your sponsees to take a leap of faith. I need you to take one too. And wouldn't you know it, around that time I was working with more and more sponsees in the way that I always wanted to work with them, like going hard, going daily. And I was meeting them in person, and I wasn't getting it. So my nicotine, I wasn't able to sneak out for smoking in between. And so my nicotine level was going lower and lower and lower. I'm like, there's no way, it's meant to be. It's meant to be. See? And then the Tuesday before, I had the very surrendered response of, I've made a terrible mistake. Absolutely not. Oopsies, I better give up being mean to me, or something like that. I don't know. We're not doing this. What a terrible mistake that was. No, what am I doing? I'm not going to do it. And I remember I met a sponsee. We did her fifth step. I met another one, and we were all outside having a smoke. And as I was sitting out there, the lanyard on my vape, it caught on the brake of my wheelchair and smashed to the ground. And I've not had any nicotine since. And that is an example of God doing for me that which I could never do myself. I'm not an anti-smoker. I didn't do it. On my own power, I couldn't have done it. God did it for me. So that's why I love Fitzmayo. And it's really quick, but what is this but a miracle of healing? Yet its elements are simple. Circumstances made him willing to believe. He humbly offered himself to capital M Maker, as in, I am created, I am made, I am loved. Then he knew. Even so, God has restored us all to our right minds. The mental obsession is lifted. To this man, the revelation was sudden. Some of us grow into it more slowly. And this is another promise, but he has come to all who have honestly sought him. And again, a promise. When we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us. How do I draw near to God? These 12 steps as a way of life, like my life depends on it, because it does. And that's it for me. I'll stop the recording and toss it over to Vivian. So thank you so much.